Alright guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on InRange. This is our very last stage of the Tiger Valley two-man team match. And we figured we'd give you guys kind of an audio overlay here because this is a really long stage. This is a half an hour long.
Yeah, where do you see stages that actually go 32 minutes long in length? And so, since it would be pretty boring to watch this without any narrative on top of it, we figured we'd use this stage as a general discussion of this stage, but also our match conclusions.
Yeah. So the way the stage works is over the course of the next half hour, either one or two targets at a time will be randomly presented in the firing pits at the 200-yard line here. And all of the teams are set up on the line simultaneously, or half of them, one whole squad. So there's 21, 22 teams on the line. Each target has a number spray painted on it, and you are responsible for shooting at the target that has your number on it.
That doesn't sound like much, but what actually in practice it is, because what you're doing is you have to sit there and look downrange for the entire duration of this time. And at the time, you didn't know that it was going to be 30 minutes. You just knew you were going to be laying there, like guarding a sector.
Right.
And so a target randomly would pop up and it would have a number on it. It would either have a 20 on it, or a 39, or a 38, or a 37. And of course, the majority of the targets aren't yours. We happen to be team 40. But that whole time you're watching the target, you have to identify when 40 pops up. And then it's going to move. It might just pop up for a duration of time. It might walk across the bay. It might run across the bay. You didn't know what you were going to get.
It might move and then stop and then start moving again. And you only have 5 or 10 seconds for each exposure.
Exposures were short and variable, and during your target's exposure, you only had 5 rounds per shooter per team. So each team could fire 10 rounds at their provided target. In fact, right there you just saw a team shooting at one.
Yep. So grand total of a chance for 40.
40 hits.
40 hits if you make it absolutely perfect.
And by the way, so 40 hits at 200 yards on a walking and or running target doesn't sound like much until you do it.
Yeah.
It's quite a challenge.
This was a really fun stage. I really enjoyed this.
No, it goes right in line with what Tiger Valley really did in terms of a match. While it is a match with a time and a score, the practical skills that were emphasized throughout the match were really very different than many other venues we've been to. And sitting there for 30 minutes monitoring your sector, communicating with one another, and then getting hits on that target without getting bored, not paying attention, or being fatigued is a real world challenge.
Yeah. In fact, you had a really interesting thing here. There are a number of experiences that go along with sitting behind a scope for half an hour. One of them is it's actually really fatiguing to your eye to be staring through a scope for half an hour. Mm-hmm. I did not. I had my variable set to about 3.5 power for this one, which allowed me to, I was able to see, if you look at those numbers up on top of the berm, I was able to see maybe 4 of them. That was kind of the width of my field of view. So as you can see me here, I spent most of my time looking over to the side of the scope.
Yep, and that's really interesting because I was running the HoloSun 503C red dot with the EOTech reticle, but behind it I have a Vortex 3x magnifier. And with that 3x magnifier, even though you and I were pretty much at the same magnification level, I could see the entire range of fires. So if you look downrange here, you see targets were only going to be exposed between target berm 1 and I believe it
About
was 12. And through my vortex, I could actually see that entire sector.
Yeah.
So while you could look downrange with your naked eye like you were looking for movement, I was actually able to stare through the magnifier through the whole time, and occasionally got a little heads up because you'd see like a little piece of a head or something popping up, and I'd say, hey, there's something moving on the left, and then it'd pop up, and I could see the number immediately because I could look through the magnifier the whole time.
Yeah, I was not expecting that capability from that dot and magnifier.
I'm surprised to see that there was that difference of a field of view downrange at 200 yards between the two optics, even at the same magnification level.
Yeah. So some people are going to ask, oh, there I go. I decided to up the magnification a little bit at this point. Some people are going to ask why I didn't crank it all the way to 6 in order to get the best hits. And the answer was I needed to be able to quickly pick up the target, to go from looking at the whole bay to going into the scope, locate the moving target, and then, hey, there we go. There's our first target exposure.
Yeah, we're blasting that guy.
Yeah, some of these I felt I did a lot better than others.
Well, it's interesting because there was a couple things going on at play. So you were kind of talking about magnification levels, and there's definitely a thing as too much magnification.
Right.
And when you're engaging a moving target, especially one that might run, that one happened to be walking, but one that's running, in a 6x field of view, you're going to lose situational awareness of that target very quickly.
Right. What I really wanted to avoid was this problem of I see movement, and then I go down into the scope, and then I spend 5 seconds scanning with the scope trying to figure out where I've pointed the rifle to find the target. only to find that the target has then disappeared. So I left it at about 3.5 power.
This is also an interesting point in that magnification is frequently more important for identification than necessarily for engagement.
Yeah.
I could have absolutely engaged these moving targets, no problemo, with just the red dot. What I could not have done with just the red dot was identify the number on the target.
Right.
And so by having the 3x magnifier behind the red dot, I was able to see, okay, that's target 37 or that's target 38. And we were looking specifically for 4-0, and you did not want to waste your limited rounds on a target that was not yours.
Right.
So I needed magnification for identification. I did not need magnification for actual engagement and getting hits.
Interesting.
Yeah. So that's what's so important about magnification in the field, and I think that's what's really cool about what this stage did is it put an emphasis on a couple practical things, which is being able to keep patient and engage moving targets, also moving targets in variable wind conditions. So you might have a target running right with left wind, or a target running left with left wind. All that plays into what you have to do to track and trap and get hits.
Yep.
But being able to identify that number was paramount.
So overall, we ended up with a total of 23 hits on target.
Which doesn't sound like much when you realize we fired 40, but that actually, compared to all of the other targets we saw from the other 42 teams, we don't have the numbers about each team's hits, but when we looked at the targets comparison, we were up at the higher end of hits.
Yeah, I'm thrilled with over 50% hits.
And what we don't know is which ones you fired and which one I fired, but we know that between us, 40 rounds fired downrange, we got 23 hits on target.
A bare minimum of we each made at least 3 hits.
Well, no one crossfired on us on this, so those 23, we earned all 23 of those hits. And guys, I'm going to go ahead and tell you, when people say stuff, oh, that's nothing, I can hit stuff at 200 yards all day. Let me go ahead and challenge you on that. Go ahead and do that in variable wind conditions while laying there for 30 minutes and have the target running unexpectedly from one side to the other. That changes everything, because how you trap and track a target that's moving like that is not the same thing.
Yeah. This was finally a stage where this Spartan carbon fiber bipod worked really well.
Oh, that's a good point, because we talked about bipods before, and one of the things about bipods is you want them when you want them, but you don't want them when you don't want them.
This is kind of exactly the situation we had in mind when we decided on that Spartan bipod.
It is, because you could put it in your pack, and it was lightweight and wasn't a lot of kit banging around, but when you needed a bipod, if you had to do this for 30 minutes and stay attentive facing these targets downrange off of just a monopod in your mag, I think you would have found this stage to be far more difficult.
Yeah, much more fatiguing.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about the bipods more later, but I just wanted to point out this one, it really shined.
And one of the examples, we'll go to the bipod later again, but like I said, one of the things about this is the bipod really comes into play not only for accuracy, but when you need to guard a sector like this, being able to keep the gun pointed in the general vicinity of the area you're supposed to be watching.
Hey, we're shooting. And notice that every one of your freaking pieces of brass hits my rifle.
Well, that was on purpose. No. Being able to guard a sector for a while is pertinent, not just in a military application, also in a match application, rarely like this, definitely for hunting. But I mean, think about a law enforcement officer that's told to guard that window for 7 hours of hostage negotiations.
Yeah.
That is extremely fatiguing, and you may not want a bipod on your gun when you're kicking in a door at a meth house, but you definitely do want a bipod on your gun for that 7-hour monitoring.
Yeah. All right. Well, shall we talk about overall thoughts and conclusions on the match?
Sure, absolutely. So, I kind of advertised this match when I put it out there as, yes, it is a match, and yes, it has a score, but what's more important about Tiger Valley isn't that it's a match, it's that you come away from it as having an experience. Would you go ahead? This is your first Tiger Valley. It's not my first. Would you say that was a fair way to put it?
Yeah. It definitely a match.
Yes.
But it's one that's incorporated elements, things that I had not seen anywhere else before. And I don't know, I think maybe we tend to say this a lot, but you go to Tiger Valley and complete it without timing out or without getting DQ'd, without any safety issues. Just successfully completing the match, even if you come in last place, it's worth going to.
Oh, I think that's completely true.
This one more than most.
Oh, I think this is more so than any other match that I have attended. Getting through any of these things can provide valuable skill sets and learning experience. But so we had 42 teams, 84 shooters. Of that, it seemed like, I don't know if this is the fact, but it seemed like 100% of them were because of InRange.
I don't think there was a whole lot of promotion of this match other than what we did.
Well, if that's the case, I'm not going to say 100%, but well over the 80 percentile of the teams there were because of the InRange promotion. That's kind of a really cool thing, because we saw of the group of people there, they were all really there for what I would say the right reasons.
Yeah.
They were there to practice practical, real-world skill sets in a match environment.
There were more than a few people. Actually, there were a bunch of people shooting in armor.
Yeah.
which wasn't a division, wasn't a requirement, didn't have to do it.
Oh, they just did it because they wanted to.
Yeah.
And there was an incredible amount of med kits.
Yeah.
And some really smart type of people around that kind of stuff. In fact, we had some post-match discussions where guys showed us their IFAC and their blowout kits, and a real impressive group of switched-on, skilled people.
Yeah, definitely.
More so, and I don't mean that as that you don't see that at other matches, but you don't see that type of emphasis at other matches. Right. We talked about this. You go to a typical 3-gun match, or even let's compare this and contrast it with Red October. Try to find a med kit on a shooter.
There weren't a whole lot of them.
You don't see it. And that's not... Well, I would say that's wrong because you are dealing with something that's inherently potentially dangerous, but it does show you a psychological difference between the types of people that want to go to a venue like Tiger Valley and want to go to, say, a USPSA 3-gun.
Right.
They're just a different goal set.
Yeah. And what's interesting about Tiger Valley is the skill sets that are emphasized by the vast majority of matches are not that important here. For one thing, the scoring was kind of inconsistent here. It was not uncommon to have ROs who are supposed to be calling hits miss some of your hits.
Let's clarify that on steel. So when you're shooting, you're shooting it, the paper's scored appropriately. Right. But when you're shooting at steel at 200 yards, and let's say you're pretty fast on the trigger, and you go blah 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 blah, and you get 7 hits, the guy's going to go, you need one more. Like
there was this kind of even thin layer of that across the whole match.
I would say it was applied consistently, though.
But the thing is, it didn't really matter because we're talking about stages that are bare minimum 2 full minutes, and most of them more like out to 5 minutes.
Oh, that was the shortest one. There was one stage that was 9 minutes, and
a bunch of people timed out.
A significant amount of teams actually timed out at 9 minutes.
And so with that kind of stage length, the difference that the penalty that you can get from needing one extra shot, the sort of thing that would be substantial in like a 3-gun nation match, was completely inconsequential in this.
Or
almost every stage ended with a sprint back from the end of the bay to your starting position, and that right there, you were going to gain or lose more time in that sprint than you were from what would be considered questionable referee calls in other matches.
That's an interesting point. So, and again, we just came off of Red October, but we've certainly shot our fair share of other 2-gun or 3-gun type stuff. And the kind of, when you get into those, you said 3-gun nation, that's a good example where people are starting to, well, I missed second place by 0.5 of a second. Well, that's when you hear the argument of, well, consistency above all. Every target presentation has to be exactly consistent. Every timer has to be exactly calibrated. The targets have to be painted exactly perfectly. But when you're talking about a stage that runs 8 minutes and 45 seconds, of which every penalty is worth a minute, suddenly those tenths of a second actually become irrelevant, and little quibbles about consistency aren't even necessary to worry about.
Remember, almost every stage had multiple spots where you had to unload and show the RO that your rifle or pistol was clear. Those things, that's an element to the match that is completely inconsistent time-wise. How do you standardize on that? People don't really practice. I mean, you can practice how quickly can you unload, remove the mag and open the chamber, but then you have to show it to the RO to their satisfaction in whatever position they happen to be standing in behind you, left or right or whatever. And that sort of element just didn't matter in this match. I think people may look at that in the video on some of the stages and complain about it. Hey, how can you possibly stand having this sort of inconsistency in the match? Well, it just really came out in the wash. There were stages where we saw one team had 37 minutes of penalties.
37, not 37 minutes of things like clearing your gun, literally 37 minutes of accumulated penalties on target hits.
Right. Their time was something like 3 minutes plus 37 minutes of penalties.
Stage time 40 minutes.
Yeah.
Yep. So in an environment like that, stuff like that doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And you have to realize, yes, there's an artificiality introduced by being required to unload and reload consistently.
Right.
However, these environments are there to garner efficiency and proficiency with weapon systems. So needing to unload and reload you could see that as iterative practice in weapons handling. You also have to realize this is a civilian-oriented match in which you are doing things like bounding Overwatch and you're crossing past one another, and live loaded chambers in that is a reckless endeavor.
Yeah. I really, really like the fact that there wasn't a 180 to deal with during basically any of the movement in this match.
The guns only are, yes, I'm sorry, the guns are only held to a 180 when they're actually hot.
Right. So there are a lot of positions, like in the regular two-gun matches, where if you're going to move, say, from the 50-yard line back to the 100-yard line, you have to do kind of a match contortion to make sure that the muzzle's always pointed back down towards the impact berm, even if you're running the opposite direction. At Tiger Valley, you didn't have to even consider that, because once the gun's clear, the 180, there isn't, you don't have to worry about muzzle control.
And suddenly all the things that you would want to be able to do in a real world environment, you can do, like throw the gun over your back, sling it on like a backpack. Don't worry about,
Exactly.
You don't want to sweep people, but you don't have to worry about it, right?
There are things like going up and down a ladder that you almost could not conceivably do in any other match, because how do you go up and down a ladder while maintaining a 180 on your rifle?
And this is the safe middle ground. And so, for example, one of the things that we have to do at 2GACME, which is the match I run in Tucson, is we don't do this clear thing. And I would like to, quite honestly, but we don't, because we get such a wide variety of shooters.
Yeah.
And so as a result, there's artificiality introduced into two-gun action challenge match of the 180 being maintained at all times,
Right.
even with sometimes unloaded guns. And it's really kind of an annoyance to me, because I find the forced 180 to be more artificial than having to unload the gun to do something like navigate a barricade while retaining your rifle.
I completely agree. One of the other things that allowed Tiger Valley to do that was the fact that they had a lot of ROs. So we were only running 2 stages at a time during this entire match. There were 2 squads of 21 teams. And the reason for that was, let's say you have a stage that's got 3 different positions. You're in the second story of the tower, the first story of the tower, and the helicopter. Well, they'd have 2 ROs at each one of those positions, one for each shooter, to do things like check, make sure you're clearing rifles appropriately. You don't have one RO who's trying to keep an eye on 2 shooters running, all the way up and down the course.
Right, no, totally. And the kind of people that came to this event were understood the purpose for that kind of a rule.
Right.
Like in a standard public venue, like I have with 2-gun, we get, like I said, we have regular shooters that are core, but we have just new shooters that show up, and we're running in a range where there's a bunch of just range officers that don't understand that sort of a practical tactical match environment. And so if they saw anyone getting swept with the gun, even if it was confirmed unloaded 17 times over again, they lose their minds.
Right.
So I'm sort of constrained by the environment I'm running in.
Yeah, for sure.
But this definitely provides less artificiality. So when you get to an obstacle course thing, such an 8-foot tall chain link fence,
Fun, good times.
that's great. No, and it's cool. But what makes it more cool is at 2-gun, we would put the gun on the ground, you'd scale the fence, pick up the gun.
Right.
Well, here you went over the fence with your gun.
Yep.
And by the way, going over the fence with the gun is a far different thing than going over the fence without the gun.
There were at least a couple people who fell onto their rifles.
We know of at least one person that fell off of one of the barricades directly onto their gun. And so when you're going over that, if you get a little wobbly or something goes a little awry, the realization you have in your mind is, I have this thing slung on my back. One, I don't want to break my thing, but I also don't want to break me when I land on the thing. But that mental stuff cannot be understated. That's a problem.
Yeah, definitely.
And so I like that, and I'd love to see more of that. And this is a venue that really pushes. Their goal has always been the practical side of things. So TJ, who runs Tiger Valley, he's the guy that runs and administrates and owns this facility. He is a SWAT team guy, and he predominantly runs SWAT team matches at this facility. This happens to be a civilian-oriented match, but his stuff is SWAT team focused.
Yeah.
And I think it comes through in spades, not only in stage design, but some of the decisions like this: unload but carry your rifle with you throughout the course of fire, because he wants to emphasize those real-world skill sets.
And the 1-minute penalties.
Yes.
That is the important thing, is don't screw it up. First, don't do something wrong. Secondly, make good hits.
That's one of the dilemmas I have in match design.
God, you're freaking throwing brass onto my scope again.
It's one of the dilemmas I see in match environments in general, is that everything is so time focused, and everything is and by the way, speed and accuracy is a huge skill.
Right.
I'm not trying to undermine that. But the emphasis being so much on time and time only really does introduce things into environments that are frequently very, wow, look at us, somebody's blasting on that one.
That was a freaking awful muzzle break over there.
Yeah, but that time is the only thing frequently corrupts some of the goals.
Right. The problem is, it's hard. Time is the only thing that you can actually quantitatively score.
Well, the other side of the fence, well, not exactly true, because the other side of the fence is you have like NRA high power, which time is really not a factor at all, but it's completely marksmanship. Right. And you know what? The thing is, time is important. Speed and efficiency is important. Accuracy is important.
Yep.
But how do you try to balance the two? And so running this with that SWAT mindset in which, when you talk to TJ, he goes, every errant round is a huge penalty in the real world.
Yeah.
So therefore, every penalty is a minute. Suddenly, that need to rush as much as you feel at some other venues is greatly deprecated and diminished because now it's much more important to get hits or not make a mistake than it is to go as fast as possible.
Yeah. And if you do just go completely balls to the wall as fast as you can, you're gonna screw up.
And we saw it. We saw there was I'm aware of three people that fell out of the match based on injury. And one of them was someone going so fast, two of them actually. Well, there were some DQs too, but three of them that dropped out due to injury were going so fast that one of them landed and slid on his face.
Yeah, that was bad.
On
a gravel road.
But that's when you're like, I'm trying to go as fast as possible at all things, and nothing else is considered. Well, that's an instance in which maybe you should have slowed down,
Right.
and not slid across gravel with your face.
Yeah.
There was another team that got DQ'd, which, by the way, they were doing phenomenal. And we're not making fun of people here. We're just saying they were going so fast that he got ahead of himself, and he did not realize it's artificial, but he forgot to clear his rifle.
Yeah.
These guys were definitely in it to win it, and I watched them, and they're good. He didn't clear his rifle, moved to the next position, and when he got to his second position, he cleared it, but it was too late. He had already walked past an RO and another shooter in the process.
Yeah.
He got he got stage DQ'd.
Right.
Well, that was a situation in which taking that extra split-second time to do what you needed to do administratively on the clock would have not DQ'd them out of the event.
Yeah.
So that kind of 1 minute penalty or those type of very invasive penalties change your mindset to how you approach a stage.
And it forces you to build a sense of awareness of what you're doing, rather than, and actually this is, I think, is something that bit you, rather than trying to memorize a run through for an entire stage, because in most matches you have to do that because you have to have it like autonomous where you go and what you're shooting in what order in order to have a competitive time. In this, you're a lot of this, I think you're better off going into it with an open, aware mind and confirming, like, okay, I'm at this position. What do I do here? Right, I do that. I'm at this position. That looks like a hard target. I'd better slow down and take that target a little slower.
To toot our horn, I think we did a very good job of flowing very efficiently and communicating with each other.
Yes.
Communication on this two-man team match is paramount. Communicating with each other, I'm doing this, you're doing that. Now, there is a little bit of that pre-planning that can happen, and when you go to a normal two-gun or three-gun match that's not as practically oriented as this, you do exactly what you describe, especially like USPSA three-gun. You literally plot how many steps you take between target presentations, and then you memorize there's 3 targets on the right, 4 targets on the left, and you actually plot out, I'm going to change my magazine after the third window.
Right.
And it becomes this like chess checkers game of how do I shoot the stage.
Right, because you have to do that. That level of optimization is required in order to win.
Which, by the way, I find that to be highly artificial and almost useless skill set. It's only useful in that you use it to do well in that environment.
Right.
When you have stages like this that are 9 minutes long, suddenly plotting out that stage like that becomes far less pertinent.
Right.
And you have to just, even if you plot it out, things go wrong and you have to flow with whatever occurs.
What you get into is a level of planning that's kind of like, okay, we have to clear the shoot house. So we'll kick in the door, you go left, I go right, and then we'll engage targets
and then we play it
we can.
and then we wing it. And we did that, for example, in the pistol hostage stage.
Right, with the clay pigeons.
Very good job of engaging targets together. Yep. But what you said did bite me, and it did. I let some of that 3-gun, 2-gun trickle in, and on one of the stages you and I had plotted out, okay, at the beginning of this, you're going to take barricades 1 and 2, and I'm going to take, Ian's going to take barricades 3 and 4. Yep. We run to the next bay, and we're just going to stay with that paradigm.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Right, so Carl takes 1 and 2, Ian takes 3 and 4, and then we find out, bay 2, the first shooter has to take barricade 1 and 3, and you have to bounding Overwatch, and the second shooter has to take 2 and 4. And that's fine, and we did adapt and overcome in that regard. I went to 1, shot 1, went to 3, and then shot target 2.
Yeah.
And the reason I did that is because I had been thinking, and you and I had been plotting out for a good hour before that I was going to shoot 1 and 2. And when I went from barricade 1 to barricade 3, I did that part right because you were at 2. But when I got to 3, and I know I did it, and I realized it when they told me, I saw the target in front of me, and I went, oh, I'm on target 2. And I actively and intentionally shifted my fire position to target 2, therefore leaving no hits on target 3,
right,
which cost us a 2-minute penalty.
Yep.
The reason that hurt so bad for me, that was a good punch to my psyche, was because, one, if we hadn't been plotting it out that much, if you and I had just winged it, that wouldn't have happened.
That's true.
Because I wouldn't have been thinking it. But if we had just flowed with it and had never talked about doing targets 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, that wouldn't have happened.
Right.
And then why it really hurt was we actually probably would have been the stage winners for that stage.
Yeah.
We came out of that
At
stage.
least in our squad. We don't know about the other squad.
We don't know, but I think we would have, because we came out of that with the lowest time I've heard from anyone. And even with those 2 errant rounds, we still came out with some of the lowest penalties too.
Yeah.
So that stage was ours, and that one mental error cost. But
Now, I don't think we've yet mentioned how we did overall in the match.
oh, good point. Absolutely.
Which was pretty awesome.
Yes.
We did 6th out of 42 teams.
Out of 42 teams, we came in 6th. And I did mention in some of the videos the AMU was there, and that's sort of true. It's the Army Marksmanship Unit Cadet Division of the Texas University, I think it was.
Texas A&M.
So it is AMU, but it's not the official AMU. It's like cadets
Right.
becoming AMU, potentially. However, these are I'm going to use the word kids because there are a lot
They're
of...
freaking kids.
They're half our age, right? But they were young, really cool, awesome. That group of people, awesome guys and girls. And they were there, and they did their best, and they were fast and efficient, and they were definitely using practical gear.
Yep.
They were some of the ones wearing armor.
A bunch of those guys were wearing armor.
And they were those are the people you want to shoot against, because people like that make you rise up.
Yes, definitely.
And so in a world where that was, I think they were what, 10 of the squads?
9 teams.
9 teams, and we came in 6th. They beat, and I think the 5 that came in front of us were all of them. No, 4 were the AMU cadets.
Yep.
1 was one other civilian group. Well, not AMU cadet.
Yeah.
And then us, and then the other AMU behind us. So out of 42, we came in 6th. I hate to think that if we hadn't had those 2 errant rounds on that one stage, we maybe would have come in 5th or 4th. But it is what it is. Actually, when we did the math, you and I, the amount of penalties you incurred and the amount of penalties I incurred were the same.
Yep.
We both came in. You and I were exactly equal in how much damage we did to our team score.
We each got 3 penalties over the course of the match.
And by the way, that is nothing.
I know. That was... I'll tell you what, my goal for doing this next year, which, by the way, I don't know about you, I will absolutely be doing this.
Oh, absolutely, I'm there.
My goal for this match would not be to win it. My goal would be to complete it without any penalties.
I think coming out of this match, regardless of you place with a clean score, would be an astonishing accomplishment.
Yeah. And honestly, if you do come out of it without any penalties, you're going to run a very good chance of winning, if not being in the top 3.
Oh, totally. Totally.
But I would want, if I came out of it, 12 other people all did it clean and all beat me, but I also did it clean, I'd be thrilled with this match.
I see we got 5 minutes left here, but let's draw conclusions in general. So, all the matches we shoot are fun, and for example, let's take Red October is somewhere between this and what I would say is traditional 3-gun in terms of its approach to stage design.
Yeah.
This is my 2-gun action challenge match, and this are far aligned. They're closely aligned.
They're similar in perspective.
Yes.
But this is well beyond monthly to GACME in terms of the physicality and the length of the stages. I think these are things you'd like to run, but can't practically run in a monthly match environment where we do 2-gun.
This is some of the stuff here in terms of stage length and physicality. We used to see more of it at my 2-gun match. And due to the popularity and the growth of it.
And some jerk showed up and started putting it on the internet.
Yeah. Well, no. That's a good thing. And more people's better in that regard. We want people to be skilled with arms if they're going to have them. But the reality is, now that we're dealing with an environment in which I've got 60 to 70 shooters instead of 25, 4-minute long stages are not a reality. They just don't work. So we still keep the DNA. And I think that you see when you look at 2-gun, we still have that vibe. But we can't do what we got to see at Tiger Valley.
Yeah.
We talked to TJ, and he said he's absolutely on board for doing this next year.
Awesome.
If we had 42 teams this year, I have no reason to think that we couldn't have 84 next year.
Definitely 50.
And TJ can prepare for that. Well,
he'd have to.
Here's the thing. In the world, that there are a lot of matches and venues out there, and there are lots of 3-gun and lots of USPSA and lots of IPSC and all that, and none of that, I always like to say this, not against any of it, but I'm for what I'm for. And in that competitive environment, this idea of hybridizing training environment and a match is absolutely possible. Tiger Valley and what we do at 2-gun is evidence thereof it being possible, and I think we need to see more of this. I would love to see more of this.
Yeah. Before we're out of time, I do want to throw in a word about our gear. We were both running our What Would Stoner Do rifles, and we were both running basically Roland Special pistols. Clock 19s we both have Delta Point Pros. You have a comp on yours, I don't. I found the pistols to be absolutely fantastic.
Phenomenal.
Those-
They well exceeded above and beyond any needs of this match.
yeah, they turned what would have been challenging pistol shooting stages with iron sights into pretty much easy.
Yeah, I concur.
You had to be on your game, but there was nothing in there that was going to present a serious challenge for the pistol.
Not at all.
And then the best thing, what's really cool, the best thing I can say about the rifles is that I never had my attention drawn to my rifle during a stage. The rifle was always simply there, and I bring it up and pull the trigger, and bullets go down range. I had no malfunctions during the match. There was never a position in there where I'm like, this thing on the rifle is getting in my way, or if it wasn't for this, I could have done this with the. It just worked, and that's, I think, the best thing you could hope for from a combat rifle, which is really at the core a tool. You want the tool to just do its job and not distract you from what you're trying to do.
First of all, we have yet to actually clean a what was done to do rifle. We just lube them.
We did, however, put oil in mine.
Yeah, but we haven't cleaned them.
That was the first time we had put oil in my rifle over the entire course of this project.
Well, what I want to say about that, the what was done to do rifle and the Roland Special pistols, the gear was never ever at the focus of a problem.
Right.
In fact, the gear disappeared and was just there when we needed it to be.
Yep.
In fact, so this is where that kind of stuff matters. The pistol shots were not a problem. The running, not long distances, I would say sprinting because it's on the clock, as fast as you can haul. You know what? Carrying the rifle disappeared. The rifle was never the problem. I wasn't running with the rifle thinking, God, this thing is heavy. All I was thinking was, I need more cardio.
God, I want to die.
Yeah, well, I need more cardio, and that's something you're particularly good at. Although I would say that, although you clearly run faster than I,
You were never more than a
I
couple
was never
yards
more than a
behind
couple
me.
seconds behind you, so it all worked out.
Yeah.
But when you're running with that, like if you were running with an M27 IAR, you'd be like, this thing's a beast.
And hiking that thing over the obstacle course. Yeah.
I have a good contrast for this. When I was at Red October, all I could think of, and this really did take, my score at Red October is not what it should have been. I'll tell you, frequently throughout the course of fire, all I could think about was this rifle's a bitch and this armor sucks. Like, no, seriously.
Yeah.
And I never thought once through all of Tiger Valley, never once did I think, gosh, I wish my pistol or rifle could have been different.
Yeah.
These what would standard do rifles disappear into the background, and they're just there to launch bullets accurately when you need them to.
Yep.
So I don't really have anything more to say about that.
Yep. I think we're pretty much at the end of the stage here. We got our 4 presentations.
Yep.
I think I've already unloaded, in fact. So we're just kind of chilling.
If you want to watch this, at the end of this, I'm going to throw in one more where all of the squads get to shoot at one piece of running paper.
Yeah.
And you'll be amazed with... that's
that it?
That's it.
That was it.
Yep. That right there, here's the deal. That target was exposed for that short duration of time. 20-something squads fired as many rounds at it as they could, and it had, according to them, no hits. If that doesn't put into perspective the reality of a running man at 200 yards that you know is going to be there and you can potentially miss them, I don't know what does.
Yeah.
So, guys, hopefully you like this kind of stuff. This is now, 7 or 8 videos of Tiger Valley. It's a very interesting venue, and this is the kind of stuff we want to see more of. You're going to have another Tiger Valley next year. We have an InRange special event coming up in February, 3rd and 4th. It's going to be very physically oriented.
It's going to be a really cool one.
It's going to be very cool. Please keep your calendars open for that. It'll be near Phoenix on February 3rd and 4th of 2018.
Yep.
But above and beyond that, remember, InRange is a totally viewer-supported project. We are dependent only on you to make sure that we continue being able to do this kind of content via Patreon. We decentralized distribution of our content, and it's you, the viewer, that keeps InRange alive. Thanks for watching or
Thanks, guys.
listening. Yep. Bye.